use animals in medical experiments every day, but what if we were the lab rats? Let's look at 5 unforgettable Star Trek episodes that explore exactly that. Starting with The Empath from the original series, an episode so disturbing it was banned in the UK for over 20 years.
You were correct, Captain. This has all been a great laboratory, and we have been the subjects of the test.
The Empath from the first season of the original series begins innocently enough. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy beam down to evacuate a research station before the planet's sun goes nova. But within minutes they are attacked, transported over 100 meters underground, and wake up in a darkened chamber unlike anything we have seen in Star Trek before.
We enjoyed doing one of them called The Empath, as I've said before, because it was shot in such a unique way. They draped the whole stage off about this size in black, and it was dark as it could be in there, and they shot it in pinpoint lighting. We did it like theater in the round. It was very interesting.
They are not alone. There's a woman there, an alien woman, who recoils in pain when Kirk reaches out to her, but then proceeds to touch him and heal the wound on his forehead, first absorbing the injury into her own body. McCoy describes her as an empath because of that healing ability, a different sort of empath from Deanna Troi, and according to his tricorder readings, she doesn't appear to have vocal cords.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to call her Gem.
Gem, Doctor?
Well, that's better than Hey You.
The aliens responsible for their captivity are the Vians, a species with technology that is clearly beyond Starfleet's. They can create force fields that drain energy directly from a person's body, and they've built a laboratory filled with instruments of torture and cylindrical pods containing the bodies of the researchers from the surface. They have imprisoned Gem with a purpose. They can only save one word from the supernova. They want it to be Gem's word, but first, she must prove her species worthy by demonstrating the ultimate act of compassion, healing someone at the cost of her own life. The Vians have selected Kirk, Spock, and McCoy as Gem's teachers. Each one of them, they have observed, is willing to give their life for the others. Their will to survive, their love of life, their passion to know, all of those things are now recorded into her being. But there's a twist. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are also just another set of lab rats for the Vians to use and experiment on as they please. First, they torture Captain Kirk to observe whether or not Gem will heal him. When she does, they need to present her with a more difficult challenge, a life so threatened that healing it would mean sacrificing her own. The Vians give the captain an impossible choice. Select either Spock or McCoy for the final experiment. McCoy would surely die. Spock might live, but his mind would surely be lost. McCoy makes the choice for the captain. While Kirk is still weakened from his own torture, the Doctor administers hypospray to both the captain and Spock, incapacitating them just long enough to volunteer himself for the Vians' final experiment.
Why did you let him do it?
I was convinced in the same way you were, Captain. By the good doctor's hypo.
What follows is brutal. The Vians are interested in observing Gem's reaction, but when she finally overcomes her fear to heal him, McCoy pushes her away. He's a doctor, sworn to protect life, and he would rather die than let someone else sacrifice themselves for him. It's up to Kirk to argue that the Vians' own disregard for life made the experiment a failure before it had even begun. This is the first of the themes that emerged from looking at episodes about aliens experimenting on humans. Those conducting the experiment are almost always more technologically advanced, but they lack empathy. They do not see the lives of their subjects as valuable, and in several of these stories, the aliens are studying advanced qualities such as mercy, compassion, and self-sacrifice, qualities which they themselves do not possess. The Empath is a very unique episode in many ways. Most of it takes place in the underground chamber, shot almost entirely in pinpoint lighting, unlike most other episodes in the original series. It also has strong horror elements, which, as we'll see, is a trend in episodes about experimentation on sentient species, and was one of 4 episodes to remain banned in the United Kingdom for over 20 years for its depiction of the already unpleasant subjects of madness, torture, sadism, and disease. It's a great story for the main trio, a great moment for McCoy, and there's a sweet moment full of unspoken words when Kirk and Spock look after the Doctor, much like he has done for them countless times in the past.
You've got a good bedside manner, Spock.
The The Vians at least explain their purpose. What happens when the experimenters don't bother with explanations? When the crew doesn't even know they're being experimented on until it's almost too late? That's the nightmare scenario explored in the Next Generation's Schisms.
My God.
What is it?
It looks as though your arm has been severed and then reattached.
What?
When the episode begins, Commander Riker can't sleep. For 3 days, he's woken up exhausted, irritable, snapping at his friends over minor annoyances, and he's not the only one. Worf panics at the sight of Caesars. Geordi's visor mysteriously fails. Data discovers he has somehow been absent from the Enterprise for over 90 minutes without any record of where he went. It's Deanna who recognizes the pattern. After 3 people come to her with extreme emotional responses to an inanimate object, she takes it upon herself to find other affected people on board and put them together in a room to try and make sense of the experience. Using the holodeck, they reconstruct the fragmented memories. A metallic surgical table under harsh light, a restraining arm, darkness, and a swing arm tipped with blades hovering over their heads. It's a chilling scene, with each one of their memories complementing the rest, as the room echoes with the whispered clicking noises overlapping each other, and they all come to realize they didn't imagine this. This table, this room, this was real, and they were all there.
I've been in this room before.
We've all been here before.
Upon examining them, Dr. Crusher uncovers the final pieces of the mystery. The abducted crew members have abnormal serotonin levels, along with tachyon residues, and there's evidence that Commander Riker's arm has been amputated and surgically reattached. When Picard asks the computer if all the members of the crew are accounted for, 2 of them are missing even as they speak. Everything indicates that members of the crew are being abducted every night, taken to an alien surgical lab through subspace rifts where they had experiments conducted on them. When the experiments escalate and one crew member's blood has been replaced with liquid polymer, the crew devises a desperate plan. The next time Riker is taken, he will carry a homing device and be given a neurostimulant to stay conscious. It's just enough. Riker rescues the missing crew member and returns just as the connection to the alien realm is severed. But at the episode's end, when the crew speculates about the purpose of the experiments, Riker's words are chilling.
Ensign Rager and I were lucky to have escaped. Lieutenant Hagler's dead. Whoever it was sent that thing was more than simply curious.
Schisms is Star Trek's interpretation of the classic alien abduction trope, a concept seen more frequently in shows like The X-Files than here. It works precisely because we learn almost nothing about the abductors. They remain faceless, voiceless entities conducting experiments for reasons we cannot comprehend, making them far more disturbing than aliens who explain their motives. Horrifying as these experiments were, they were relatively contained, a handful of people in controlled environments. But what happens when an entire ship becomes a laboratory? When everyone aboard is simultaneously subjected to genetic manipulation? That's the premise of Voyager's scientific method.
Sorry, these lab rats are fighting back.
At the start of Scientific Method, Voyager is not running smoothly. The ship is collecting data on binary pulsars with enormous gravitational forces. Fairly routine mission, but the crew is unwell. Captain Janeway has debilitating headaches. Tom and B'Elanna are creating excuses to sneak around and make out during the middle of their duty shifts, and Commander Chakotay suddenly develops what looks like acute arthritis, then rapid aging. He loses his hair, has bone decalcification, tissue necrosis. Across the ship, crew members are falling ill with bizarre, unexplained symptoms. The Doctor traces Chakotay's aging to abnormal DNA expression and sets up an electron resonance scanner to examine his DNA at the molecular level. And that's when he finds something chilling. Genetic tags embedded in Chakotay's genome. Barcodes, essentially, marking him as a laboratory specimen. What the Doctor is doing here is actually quite fascinating. Nowadays, when we talk about having a look at someone's DNA, we're mostly talking about sequencing. We do have the technology to visualize the double helix. Rosalind Franklin famously did that in 1952 with her photograph 51 using X-ray crystallography, and more recently there have been advances in high-resolution imaging that allowed for visualization of the double helix as well. But these images do not have clinical significance, they are not used in a clinical context. There is no situation where a doctor would need to look at the shape of the molecule itself to diagnose or treat a disease. But it is cool that Voyager imagines a future where this kind of technology technology not only is available on the bedside, but also is clinically useful. Even though the image that the doctor sees when he looks at his scanner looks more like the kind of simplified representation of DNA we see in books that to help us understand molecular biology than with what we would actually see when we look at the molecule. Those genetic tags prove this isn't a natural disease or an accident. Someone is deliberately manipulating the crew's DNA, and when the Doctor and B'Elanna get too close to the truth, they are both incapacitated. Fortunately, the Doctor manages to hide in the Da Vinci simulation and contacts 7 of 9, modifying her Borg sensory implants to detect what's threatening the crew. What she sees when she walks through Voyager's corridors is a nightmare. Dozens of aliens, invisible to everyone else, walking freely among the crew. They're poking people with medical devices, monitoring responses, making adjustments. Some crew members have elaborate contraptions strapped to their bodies. The entire ship has been turned into a laboratory. The worst moment comes when 7 tries to warn Captain Janeway, only to discover that the captain's headaches are caused by needle-like devices implanted directly through her skull. 2 aliens flank her constantly, monitoring her every reaction. The experiments haven't just affected the crew's bodies, they've been influencing the captain's judgment, making her increasingly irritable and rash. When 7 exposes one of the aliens, their purpose becomes clear. They're conducting medical research to extend their own species' lifespan and their knowledge. Voyager's crew is no more than test subjects. They have no qualms about experimenting on sentient beings, and they are fully prepared to terminate the experiment by inducing lethal genetic mutations in everyone aboard if the crew resists. Like in Schisms, we never learn the alien's species name, which reinforces the distance that exists between them and Voyager, and draws a clear line between these and the type of first contact we are more accustomed to seeing on screen. Janeway's solution to the problem is desperate. She flies Voyager directly towards the binary pulsars, betting everything on a 1 in 20 chance of survival. The extreme gravitational forces make it impossible for the aliens to maintain their equipment, and they're forced to abandon ship. There's one narrative choice here I would have done differently. The aftermath feels too clean. They should have sustained more damage, I think. Maybe even lost a few crew members, not only from the experiments, but from the structural failures caused by their attempt to drive the aliens away. That would have made the stakes feel more real and given more weight to Janeway's desperate solution. We could also have Janeway struggling with the outcome in a later episode. I know people tend to dismiss ideas like this because of the show's episodic format, but in all Star Trek shows there was always progression in the character arcs that relied on previous episodes. And every now and again, we see plot threads carrying over across episodes, like the second Fairhaven episode, for instance. This would have been a perfect moment for something like that, especially since the show has established that losing too many crew members puts the entire ship at risk when they are alone in the Delta Quadrant and have no easy way of finding replacements. That said, the premise of the episode is brilliant. We use animals in medical research every day. There are ethical concerns, regulations to ensure humane treatment, but by and large, animal testing is accepted as a necessary evil before human trials. Animals are imperfect models, though. In a universe with multiple humanoid species descended from common ancestors, it's not a stretch to imagine that some advanced civilization would use other humanoids as test subjects.
Well, everything we've been through reminds me of a laboratory experiment, as if something was testing our responses to stimuli.
The 3 episodes we looked at so far feature aliens collecting data on physical responses, torture, surgery, genetic manipulation. These are powerful aliens with advanced technology, but they're still corporeal, still humanoid, still operating within the same physical universe we understand. But there's another category of experimentation in Star Trek, and it usually involves something far more terrifying. Where Silence Has Lease begins when the Enterprise encounters a region of total darkness, a void that seems to exist outside normal space. They can't escape it. The physics of it doesn't make sense. A Romulan warbird attacks, then vanishes without explanation. A Federation starship appears, the Yamato, sister ship of the Enterprise that isn't supposed to be nowhere near this part of space, and when Riker and Worf beam aboard to investigate, then find themselves trapped in something like a haunted house, a ship with 2 bridges, impossibly twisted corridors. There are tortured screams echoing through the halls. They can't contact the Enterprise or find a way out. Back on the Enterprise, exit points keep opening and closing in the void, like someone is toying with them. Counselor Troi finally senses what's been eluding her, an intelligence so vast she hadn't recognized it as a single entity. She and Dr. Pulaski realize they are not dealing with a spatial anomaly. There's an intelligence out there that's experimenting on them. They are rats in a maze. Shortly after that realization, the maze's creator reveals himself. His name is Nagilum. A crude approximation of a human face materializes in the void before them, and he explains his curiosity about corporeal life forms. How do they function? Why are there different types? How do they respond to stimuli? And most intriguingly, how do they die? Nagilum decides he needs to kill a third of the Enterprise crew so he can properly study death. Not as punishment, not as a necessity, simply as data collection. Picard refuses. Following a strategy Janeway would later use against Voyager's invisible experimenters, he activates the ship's auto-destruct sequence with a 20-minute countdown. If Nagilum wants to study death, he can see everyone aboard die all at once. The captain waits alone in his quarters, contemplating his decision, when Deanna and Data walk in to talk to him. At first it's a conversation like many they've had before, but when their responses start to feel wrong, Picard realizes the full extent of Nagilum's power. He can create perfect, living, talking copies of the crew. Illusions that walk and talk and seem completely real. The captain can't trust anything he sees or hears. Reality itself has become Nagilum's laboratory. Unlike the aliens and scientific method, who fled when Voyager approached the pulsars, Nagilum is powerful enough that he could simply let the Enterprise destroy itself and observe what happens. Instead, he releases them, apparently satisfied with what he has learned. But Picard waits until the last possible second to cancel the auto-destruct, terrified it might be another one of the creature's tricks.
10 seconds to auto-destruct.
Captain.
Abort. Auto-destruct sequence.
Riker William T., do you concur?
Yes, absolutely. I do indeed concur wholeheartedly.
Auto-destruct. Cancelled.
Nagilum represents a different class of experimenter entirely. Beings with incredible reality-bending powers who have no qualms about experimenting with those they see as lesser beings. They have no concept of corporeal existence, no understanding of what it means to be mortal, and they see humanoids the way we might view insects under a microscope. Curious specimens worth studying, but not equals. At the episode's end, Nagilum shares his observations with Picard and shares the conclusions he's drawn about humanity.
You are too inquisitive not to want to know. You seem to find no tranquility in anything. You struggle against the inevitable. You thrive on conflict. You are selfish, yet you value loyalty. You are rash, quick to judge, slow to change. It's amazing you've survived.
All the episodes we looked at so far involve species that deliberately do something to their sentient subjects. From genetic modification to surgery to complicated games of smoke and mirrors, all of them are provoking stimuli to collect data on their responses. But in the 4th season of Enterprise, we encountered a different kind of overpowered alien.
Do you think our host will die tonight? It's possible. For some of the species that have come here, I've seen the whole crew die.
The episode begins with Travis and Malcolm, a pair we rarely see together, playing chess. Not 3D chess, the old-fashioned bidimensional variety. From the start, it's very clear that they are not who they appear to be, and Travis and Malcolm's bodies are serving as hosts to 2 alien entities. We learn that they are extremely long-lived. To them, chess is a boring game, with only 10 to the 123rd power possible outcomes, but they understand that humans don't live long enough to experience every possible game. We also learn that they are here to observe, that there is some challenge on the surface of a nearby planet, and before long it becomes clear just what kind of challenge that is. When Trip and Hoshi return from an away mission, Trip collapses. Dr. Phlox discovers they've been infected with a silicon-based virus. There is no known cure. The Enterprise is facing a medical emergency, and these entities, Organians, have come to watch how humans respond. This is what they do. For 800 years, they've been visiting this region of space, watching ship after ship encounter this virus. They didn't create it. They haven't eliminated it. They simply observe. Every single time, without exception, people die. They know exactly what is coming, and they do nothing to prevent it. I really like the characterization of the Organians in this episode. From the start, it's very clear that one of them is young, in the first mission of observation, enthusiastic about being on Enterprise, while the other one is very old. The younger alien is rooted rooting for the humans to succeed, while the Old One has been doing this for 800 years and is frankly a bit bored. Throughout the episode, they choose different hosts among the bridge crew, and it's always clear which one is which despite the different actors. Most of the story is a race against the clock, trying to find a way, any way, to help Trip and Hoshi. That culminates with Phlox developing a radiation therapy, something the Organians have only witnessed 7 times in 8 centuries, and never quickly enough to save the initial victims. But there's a problem. Moving Trip and Hoshi requires environmental suits that rob Phlox of the manual dexterity he needs for the delicate procedure. Captain Archer makes a choice. He removes his gloves and offers to be Phlox's hands, exposing himself to the deadly virus. Enterprise needs a doctor more than a captain right now, he says. It's an unprecedented act of self-sacrifice. In 800 years of observations, the Organians have never seen anything like it. But the radiation therapy fails. Hoshi dies. Trip is dying also, and that's when the young Organian breaks protocol, revealing himself to Archer and identifying his species. He has a profound respect for what the captain just did. The older Organian follows, inhabiting Hoshi's now dead body. Archer then makes a desperate plea. If you truly want to understand compassion, then show compassion. Experience it for yourself. That's what it means to be human. This episode invites comparisons between the Organians' policy of non-interference and the Prime Directive. After all, we know Starfleet also sets observation posts in alien worlds without the consent of the local population, both to prepare for first contact, but also for pure anthropological research. It's reasonable to assume, for instance, that many Mintakans were hurt or died in ways that could have prevented by the researchers observing them, and yet nothing was done. That certainly seems similar to what the Organians are doing, but I would argue that the Organians have pushed the non-interference ideal a bit too far. Observing a species in its natural environment is different from allowing a trap to remain in place for hundreds of years, watching ship after ship get caught in it, always with a loss of life. I can't imagine Starfleet doing that, and I would point out that in the past, when they encountered similar problems, their attitude was always placing beacons around the area, warning people about the danger, whether it was from a contagion, a hostile species, or something else.
But for now, we're going to leave a warning beacon in orbit here to make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone again.
What all these stories have in common is that they position the subjects as unwilling participants in the experiment. They are powerless, angry and afraid, struggling and striving to survive. As a consequence, many of these stories have horror elements to them, and the scary lab/torture chamber is a common background. Another common feature is that we never learn much about the species that are doing the experiments. Sometimes we don't even know their names. But as we have seen, there are mainly 2 types of stories that explore aliens experimenting on humans. The first involves corporeal, humanoid species. Aliens who are very similar to us, but more technologically advanced, at least in one area. These aliens are usually driven by a specific purpose, and their experiments have specific objectives that usually have to do with pushing forward scientific and medical knowledge. There is an emphasis on directly provoking stimuli in the subjects and gathering physical and biological data. To do what they do, they tend to dehumanize the species they experiment on, viewing them as we view laboratory animals, but showing no regard for their lives. The second type of episode usually features overpowered godlike entities. These aliens are usually non-corporeal, but they can inhabit humanoid bodies or take humanoid shape with varying degrees of success. Their abilities far exceed those of any Federation species, to the point where they could almost be seen as magical. In addition to having highly advanced medical knowledge, they can bend reality, generate wormholes, communicate and control ships over vast distances, and concoct complicated illusions. These species are driven by curiosity, and their experiments are psychological and sociological in nature. Through them, Star Trek explores some fundamental aspects of humanoid life, like the absurdity of sleep, the messiness of reproduction, and the inevitability of death. They don't exactly relate to the species they are experimenting on, but they tend to see them as something like what they were a very long time in the past. Because of that, although they will watch them die without interfering, they are less willing to terminate the experiments the way corporeal species are. It's tempting to draw parallels between these stories and the experiments that we conduct every day on other animals. After all, we do experiment on other living creatures and we do things that we would never consider doing in other human beings. But there's a critical difference. In our world, animal experimentation is extremely regulated and there are constant conversations about the limits of what is ethical to do to animals and how and for how long. Every researcher must follow principles like the 3 R's, for instance, that stands for replacement, that is, doing experiments that don't need animals as much as possible, reduction, which means using the smallest possible number of animals that still gives you meaningful results, and refinement, that has to do with minimizing suffering, pain, and discomfort in the subjects. The truth that we do experiments on animals that we would never do on human beings is inescapable, but it's not true that we do not have any regard for experimental animals' lives. Even when we were working with non-sentient creatures, we do not show the callous disregard for life that the aliens show for other humanoids in these stories. The Vians, the faceless surgeons of schisms, the scientists from scientific method, they all show a disturbing lack of empathy. They see their sentient subjects as disposable data points. There is no consideration for suffering, no attempt to minimize pain or discomfort, no attention to the fact that the people they're experimenting on have lives and hopes and relationships. You know, lab animals do not have sentience, right? They do not look at us and say, please stop, this isn't fair, which is exactly what the humans in these stories say every single time. And I can't imagine that if that was the case, we would continue. We wouldn't. At least most people wouldn't. Perhaps this is a future where these stories could go, showing us an alien civilization that does this kind of experiments, but that also has ethical frameworks governing those experiments. And perhaps if we saw those stories, what would that look like? And what kind of questions would those stories invite about the kinds of experiments we do every day? It's also worth pointing out that these are not the only episodes exploring these themes. One in particular I would highlight is Nothing Human from Voyager. In that episode, B'Elanna is attacked by an exoparasite, and the Doctor has no idea what to do, so he creates a holographic representation of a specialist that can help him treat B'Elanna, but the specialist happens to be a Cardassian, Dr. Krell Moset, and while they were working together, the truth emerges that he was working in the Bajoran concentration camps and he was experimenting on healthy Bajorans, and that's how he developed his surgical technique. So the episode becomes about the ethics of using a treatment that is life-saving, but it was developed at a cost of the suffering of innocent people. It's a fantastic episode, but it sits in a category of its own and it deserves a video all for itself. We also didn't look at episodes where humans are experimenting on other humans. If you want to see that, do watch my video on genetic engineering in Star Trek, which dives deeper into this specific type of human experimentation. This is it for now. Until we meet again, live long and prosper.
Please, just tell me what's on your mind.